Hey, Matt Jones here from Advanced Safety, New Zealand's leading health and safety consultancy, founder of New Zealand's Health and Safety Professionals, some 3,500 members strong, and your host on the Health and Safety Unplugged podcast series. In this episode, I am joined by Shane Penny, a retiree who is dropping a ton of knowledge and experience from his days as a WorkSafe inspector. So join me and Shane in this episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and get in amongst it.
Shane obviously had quite a number of years at WorkSafe NZ, and in recent times you've handed in your badge and are now enjoying retirement. But by all accounts, are probably just as busy, if not busier, than you were when you were as an inspector. So what are you up to these days?
So medically retired, but I putter around on my wife's dairy farm. Bought her a farm because, well, when I'm gone, she can have some kind of security.
Yes.
I also managed to do between 6 to 10 phone a friends a week. A lot of people seem to have my private number, and those who don't have my private number can either find me through LinkedIn or I make far too much noise.
Yes.
Or people share my number, which is like, how'd you get my number? Well, such and such said you were the person.
Sounds like you could probably make a killing consulting. It sounds like you're a man in demand. You're obviously also very sharing of your time and insights on the NZHSP Facebook group. I mean, there isn't really many days where we don't hear from you and get your invaluable insights. So you're obviously someone who's very willing to share your thoughts and experiences. Again, one of the key reasons why I had to reach out, really, just to pick your brains and to kind of spend some time with you.
I've been involved from a voluntary standpoint on a lot. Like, I was on the Auckland committee for the NZISM. I was on the board for the New Zealand Safety Council. I've been on the Canterbury Health and Safety Charter, who amazingly gave me an award as an inspector. And to me, that was a highlight of my career, because inspectors don't get recognised for the stuff that they do, which is a real shame. Yeah. You have the awards, Safeguard Awards. Like, they have never ever said, hey, somebody's done just amazing. No, inspectors don't get mentioned. So yeah, being on those or involved with those organisations, I've met a lot of people, and if I don't know the answer or have an opinion, and most people who know me knows I've got an opinion for just about everything, whether it's a right or wrong opinion. But if I don't know, there's people I can call, and that's when I worked as a technical specialist for construction for WorkSafe. That was probably the biggest thing that I had, was a list of people who I was able to contact, and it's all about sharing. I hate health and safety with a registered trademark on the side of it.
Yeah, fully transparent, open door policy, right?
And it's brilliant. It was a giggle about 3 years ago. This guy showed me this triple SP, and I said, hey, no, that's a bloody brilliant document. You've thought of everything, and rah, rah. And he goes, oh yeah, it was a lot of work. And I said, it's only version 12. And he goes, what do you mean it's only version 12? I said, it should be version 17A. And he goes, what do you mean it should be version 17A? I said, my last version was 17A. I said, I can see where you've taken Bort Longyear off the top of it. And it was actually a triple SP I'd written years ago when I was with Bort Longyear. And he was quite shocked to find an inspector had actually once upon a time had a life outside of the
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's so funny. And it's really interesting, like your point about the fact that the inspectors don't get a lot of limelight, often operating in the shadows, for want of a better word. I think that in itself is perhaps a bit of an issue. Is that something you would agree with? Do the inspectors need more focus or limelight?
I don't think they need more, but the occasional recognition of some of the work that some of them put in. And even for
Yes.
WorkSafe to nominate someone for the Safeguard Awards. The only
Mm.
reason I got a ticket to go to Safeguard myself was because I'd actually, Joe Pregmore and myself had posthumously nominated somebody for an award. And somebody heard
Yes.
about it and went, Shane, are you going to Safeguard? I went, I can't afford the cash for that. I've got a family of and managed to get a ticket. Now, if WorkSafe nominated an inspector, somebody with boots on the ground every year for something like that, that they'd actually, hey, this is the recognition for really hard work for the year, or they've done something really amazing, or even our guidance team. Like there's one young lady in our guidance team. I've worked with her closely on a lot of documents like the backing guidelines, the spotters guidelines, the road and roadside worker, when we were doing all that. And Rochelle can't drive a car that's not an automatic, but by the time that we'd actually finished doing the backing guideline, she could tell you how to jackknife it and actually put it in a document discussing how to do it like a pocket knife in a way that the average person. Now that young lady is just standout, and WorkSafe has many of those, and they are very stalwart. They are the organisation is it. So yeah, they've got some amazing people in there that do some amazing stuff, and yeah, some recognition occasionally would.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in terms of the overall effectiveness of the regulator, have you got any thoughts on how it's performing and how it's performed in the past?
So up until 5 years ago, it was a place that I was very happy, and I was still very happy when I actually left. So I'm not one of these people who have been kicked out the door, of course.
Yes.
But up until 5 years ago, it had a vision, it had a direction, and it had something that everybody believed in. And those within the inspectorate knew we were heading in the right direction. Strangely enough, about that time, we went into some very interesting stuff where basically the entire of WorkSafe was told, this is where we're heading. If you're not on the walker, get the hell out. And I was in the room when that was said, and the room went dead quiet, like, what? Secondly, we got into some stuff around becoming a world-class regulator. Now, sounds bloody good, almost sounds like Road to Zero, but let's walk before you can run, and we were still at crawling stage then. Thirdly, when I walked in, it was a bad period. So basically 10 years ago, the inspectors all had to pass an exam. If you didn't pass an exam, you had 3 months notice and you were gone. And then WorkSafe. So cohorts 1 through 4 came in with quite a messy, turbulent time of change. We're back there. This time around, the middle management that somehow managed to cockroach their way through that last lot have actually been the ones affected. But in the meantime, the number of inspectors has dwindled down so low that the morale of those inspectors has really been affected. And the training in the last 5 years has just been shocking. And that's had a lot of things and a lot of weird ideas have really affected that. One particular example is senior inspectors doing QA and QC of files. So sounds good that a senior inspector should be doing that. He knows the thing. But the SOs, so the office managers who the numbers have been dwindled down to nothing now, they could have done that checklist and handed that on. Hey, it doesn't quite meet the checklist. Then hand it on to somebody. Instead, you've got an inspector with 5 to 10 years experience sitting down and doing 30 or 40 of these. or even 10 to
Yeah.
20 of these, doing one of them is a waste of
Mhm.
their bloody time, when they should actually be out there
Yes.
training the junior inspectors, mentoring.
Yeah.
And secondly, it
Mhm.
also then becomes a teacher kind of issue where everybody's hated their teacher because they marked them down, as opposed to your mentor isn't meant to be so lots and
Yeah.
lots of fluffy stuff like that that just makes no sense.
No.
That the computer system, they've just started a new computer system and everybody is raving that it's already a mess. Now, the previous
Right.
computer system than that didn't even end up being used by the inspectorate because it didn't work. It ended up being used by the mines inspectors, but tens of millions of
Mhm.
dollars wasted because they didn't listen to the people actually using it. And the current one is sounding just
That's really interesting.
so.
So in
Yeah.
terms of
Well, you take your
so
notebook
it
notes,
sounds
right?
like yeah.
You're on site, you do your notebook notes. Then you put them in the computer. Then you've got to copy them again. Then you've got to. It's so much double handling that basically it was taking 1/3 of the time on site, 2/3 of the time for the computer work. And then on top of that, somebody's
Yikes.
QA and QCing it for even more.
Mm.
Initially, back when I
It's-
started, the only time you really got, well, they QA'd and QC'd, they checked, you'd put photos and everything and your notebook entries in. But the only time you really got rolled over, well, gone through like a dose of salts, was when somebody was complaining. And then your file got reviewed heavily. And as somebody once said to me, one of my managers, if as an inspector, if you're not getting complaints, you're not pushing hard enough. And that's quite true. You're
Okay.
not there to
Yeah.
be loved, although you're there to be helpful. And many will say that I was very pragmatic in my approach as an inspector to help. But at the same time, you're there with a red notebook that can say, hey, this is dangerous, stop it now.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Not there to make
So
friends. It's really interesting. So it sounds that, gosh, I mean, there's so many things to unpack there, but it sounds like that the number of inspectors overall has had significantly reduced during your time there. Is that right?
So it built up for a start, and then it kind of plateaued, and then it went way down. And the crazy part being, and I actually like Phil Parks in his role previous to what he took over, and quite honestly, in some degree, and a lot of people have given Phil heaps. Most of it wasn't actually deserved. Phil took over a box of hand grenades with a pin missing in one of them. And then the box of hand grenades went off, and at the same time, the ammunition depot next door went up. Previous to Phil, there was some really dodgy stuff just started and messed up. So he shouldn't take all the blame for that. However, at times, some of the stuff Phil was telling us was like the Emperor's new clothes. Because it was not Phil or that second tier of management that wasn't telling the truth. I've been there where he said we've got 120 inspectors, hand on heart. And then one of our team actually went round office to office, made a phone call to every support officer and got a count of how many inspectors we had. And it was not. So you could count me as an inspector when I had my warrant, but I wasn't an inspector. I was a technical specialist. Yes, I'd go out on site. Yes, I could write a notice, but I went to site maybe once every 3 months, not every day. So I wasn't an inspector. We had managers, chief inspectors, who managed managers who were inspectors. They all had warrants, but they weren't.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's so interesting. So, roughly speaking, can you guesstimate in terms of the ratio of warranted inspectors and those actually on the ground doing the beat?
I would say so. The count that this chap got was 86 on the beat, And at the time, I could count 32 that were like me. But there was probably more that I just didn't even think about in that count because it was a rough count. In technical alone, we had 6 or 7 people that were actually, actually more than that, 9 people that I can count that were warranted. And we were trying to warrant more in the technical team. The warrant was absolutely no use. If you wanted to do something that you needed a warrant, you called an inspector and you got them to write the notice because your technical knowledge is more use going to helping the next inspector and the next one than chasing notices for months at a time and dealing.
Gosh. And so from your experience, what do you see as being some of the negative consequences of that type of ratio?
Then a lot less inspections that where WorkSafe hasn't visually been seen, and I've been quite vocal about that. I did make the question, hey, how many people have we killed because we haven't? A great example is a place called Flatbush in South Auckland. The local office tries their best in there, but it's got a lot of residential building, and you just about have to be there 24/7 to actually get farming industry. There's been a lot of incidents. I don't think many of the actual quad bike fatalities and that kind of stuff would be solved by but there's other stuff that would be. So there's chemicals, there's PDO shafts, there's the general bread and butter. The engineering industry. I had an engineer here on the weekend. He's had 3 visits. The one across the road has never ever had a visit. And they've been going 42 years. Now, yes, he did have an incident where they took the tip off a finger, but unlike how one office that I worked with did it, they just drove down a road and they went, right, you take that side, I'll take that side. And they worked their way through what the businesses were there. If you haven't got, you don't know. And this guy that's been 42 years or whatever, I can guarantee you walk in there and he's got nothing. He might be safe as houses. He might have 3 old dudes doing it who basically don't know what a disc grinder guard is. It's not on the level playing.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And like, I guess my question for you is, from your point of view, the role of WorkSafe, because your point, and look, I agree. I'm nodding away when you say, based on our performance, how many fatalities, how many workplace incidents have come, which potentially could have been avoided if we had been out there and adequately resourced, and the ratios were better. But from your perspective, the actual role of the regulator, how would you define that?
Inform. And the education one is massive. Back for the first 5 years, all of our guidance was printed. We had new stuff rolling out all the time. And it's kind of dwindled off quite substantially. And it's now all online, if you can find it, if you find what you're looking for. Whereas, excuse me, when we actually had it in print, and it's a tool that I used to teach all of my trainees, always take a bit of guidance with you when you go on a visit. No person can ever go off their lid at you if you're handing out a present first. Here's the guidance for your industry. Oh, you're not here to slap me first. No, here it is. Let's talk from here. You will have a few that call you names, and some of those names are pretty gnarly, but most of them will actually calm down very quickly. And when they realize that you're there in an education part as well as an enforcement part, we're here to help. And so that's where, when I went to the technical team, it was brilliant because anybody could call them and go, great example. I've just run across a man cage on the end of an X. What is it? Is it an EWP? Is it not an EWP? If it is an EWP, how do we get it certified as an EWP? But we need it because we've got this big rock face that's fallen down due to an earthquake. How do we get it certified? Now, our team spent about 3 weeks, got that sorted for them. But the most shocking part that I giggled about was it was on the quick hitch and it still had a single acting quick hitch. So if the digger operator had actually knocked that switch with his elbow, which was just a butterfly switch, the 2 guys that were in the man cage would have dropped off the digger, and nobody had actually spotted that. They were more concerned about getting a stamp on this thing at the end going.
So, yeah, and I mean, that example is a good one. I actually really appreciate your insights in terms of the role of the regulator and inspector too, because I guess for many, I suspect at the moment, the sense is that we've got a fairly dysfunctional regulator that's performing pretty appallingly, and I suppose it's important to remind ourselves of actually what the role of the regulator is, because if we don't do that, we can tie individuals' performances and the roles and aspirations of health and safety advisors, managers, coordinators inside businesses, and also consultants externally. We can tie our outputs to the performance of the regulator, and I think that's a mistake. I think we need to remind ourselves that regardless of what the regulator is doing, we still have a really important task and work that has to be done. But on the flip side, we can't avoid or pretend to say that the regulator is doing everything it can. And I suppose leads me to the next point is around, from your experience and your perspective, Shane, what are some of the things that ought to be changed or brought back to improve the outputs of the regulator?
So Lauren's the current redundancy scheme is actually a good thing in my book, and some of those people have sat in roles for a very long, and some of them we had some teams that why did we have an innovation team when what the hell we weren't doing BAU, so we weren't ready for innovation, and some of the stuff we were doing, in my opinion, didn't sit within the health and safety regulator. It sat within the health side of things, the health part of the government, not the health and safety. And that was another thing that really destroyed the inspectorate's morale, was actually being the COVID police. A lot of people did not like why, a lot of inspectors didn't like why they ended up as the COVID police. Why weren't the Ministry of Health inspectors or somebody else rolled into that role? Because of course that's rolled out still with quite a bit of dislike when inspectors go on site. It was a nasty period in the world.
Yeah, and so did that become the primary focus for the inspectors, do you think?
That was the only focus through that period.
Oh my gosh, that's horrendous.
And a lot of them, I know 2 or 3 of them that actually left due to that afterwards. Just everybody knows stories of friends that bestest of friends who over the whole COVID thing went toe to toe and have never spoken since. And every inspector's a human. They've got families, they've got friends, they belong to clubs, etc. So there was a lot of feedback in that area. But what was your initial question again? Sorry, I got sidelined on that one.
No, it's okay. I guess it was in terms of what you see is the actual or how would you envision WorkSafe being fixed? Like if you had the means or the ability to redirect it and
So
put it
more
back into
inspectors.
shape.
So upping the number of inspectors to, hey, 150 would be great. 200 would be bloody fantastic. Training those inspectors with fact-based training. So last weekend on my farm, I actually had an inspector and an ex-inspector come and give me a hand for a weekend. They knew I'd been struggling a little bit health-wise, so the pair of them came out and did some farm work. In that weekend, both of them learned how a digger operates and how to basically dig a hole and the safety of what you can see from sitting in that machine. Now, I'm not saying put every inspector in a digger and make them work, but I used to take the trainees in the Auckland area to Goff's Cat, and Goffs would let them sit in all the dump trucks and everything so they could actually see what these machines seriously are. Get back to physical-based training. None of this online mumbo-jumbo. Yes, that works for ticking boxes, but when they're actually out on site, they need that physical to be able to say, oh, yes, I know that that dump truck coming at me, if it tips on its side, will take 63 meters to stop, so I won't be standing in front of it. So that's the number of inspectors and getting the training right. And the training hasn't been right for having the support in the offices. So the way inspectors are trained, they go and do the training courses, and then how we had to do it was basically you buddied up with with inspectors and they took you out. We were lucky we had enough inspectors in our office at the time that you could go with different people on different days. You didn't actually get buddied with them. Now, that worked well because after COVID, most people are working remotely and most senior inspectors don't actually come into the office. So they're not getting that ability to go, hey, where are you going? Can I come with you? And pester an inspector to take them out. So that rotation there, the training does, or the face-to-face training does require quite a bit of travel. Like when I was doing my training, we did a lot of travel. Every 2 or 3 weeks, we were either in Wellington or somewhere. So, of course, now they're looking at the green side of things, that kind of cuts down. But the bit that makes no sense to me was, why didn't they do a cohort for, say, Wellington, Wairarapa, They're only flying one person then, the trainer. Then a cohort for Auckland, then a cohort for the South Island. So they're not flying 15 people to one solid place. They're flying one person to one place, and those 15 people come. Looking at what the inspectors tell you, like middle management have religiously said, oh yeah, we're going to have this discussion, we're going to listen to you, but then we do it anyway. And had a great laugh that I had was actually the linear desks that we ended up with. Oh yes, no, we're having this discussion. Look, we're going to take your thoughts on board, and then we ended up with linear desks. And I talked to the guy who was bringing the linear desks in, and I went, so these are quick. It only took a week and a half for you to get them here. Oh no, they've been ordered for 3.5 months. It was only 6 weeks ago you put this out for consultation. So if they've been ordered for 3.5 months, why did you even bother asking us? Electric cars is another great example for the inspectorate. The mines inspector that ended up here looking at the gold mine on my farm the other day shows up in an electric car. Well, when he drove down my race, I had a giggle and thought, yeah, cool, I'm going to see a broken down WorkSafe car on my dairy farm race. Not designed, not practical, not sensible. Yes, there is a place for them. Over on the West Coast, looking at gold mines is not one.
That's hilarious.
Just listening to the guys on the ground, what they need, what the inspectorate actually needs. Listening to the industry. Industry right now are begging for plant and structures.
Yes, they are.
They're even screaming. They're doing OIAs. They're making noise. And plant and structures isn't the be-all and end-all. It isn't. I know just about word for word what the last version was because I was so involved with it. But it's bloody better than what we've got now when you've got Section 19 of PECPA rolling out Section 20. Now, to me, I could never ever figure out how they wrote the rule out before they wrote the rule. And it simplifies. There's been some utter BS out there in the world about federated farmers being the people holding it up because it's going to mandate quad bite rollover protection. No, it's not. And that was quite clear from the start. It takes the exemption away, but it does not mandate it. We're in a risk-based era now. Some people are over here, and some of the people saying this stuff, running some pretty big health and safety organizations, you really need to figure out the difference between hazard and risk.
Thank you for saying that.
And when they're saying, hey, this is the reason, no, it's not. The reason was it got the last government had it in the shelf to go in front of Parliament, and things kept jumping in front of it, like the minimum wage increases and that kind of stuff. Because, of course, plant structures ain't going to get votes. But now it needs to be taken out of the cupboard, maybe given a little bit of a fresh coat of paint. It might have had a few dings. It's going to be interesting because most of the team that worked on that document no longer exist, although two of them did go to MBIE. Most of them have gone out privately or to other areas. But that document would make life a lot simpler. The one thing that I hope comes in with that is infringements for certain things. Right now, an inspector can only infringe you for not wearing a hard hat or a helmet. PPE. How bloody ridiculous. You can do 15 bad scaffolds, and as long as nobody's killed, all you're going to get is... So regulation, more numbers, more backup with the right gear and better training. Now, if they got all of those things, we would be back to where it was going. And quite honestly, I remember a presentation just before this all went over the edge of, hey, we're here, we're about to plateau, so we need to shake things up a bit. We were not plateauing. We were just getting our boots on the ground, and it was going fine. And then somebody went, and maybe a few ex-inspectors who watch this might just sit there going, oh, Shane was actually listening.
There's a bit of a common theme in some of the points you've raised there, Shane, in terms of the management of change internally. I think it's fair to say that many organizations struggle with this, but it's where changes occurred where they haven't necessarily taken into account the end users or the members of the team that are going to be most impacted by those decisions. So you've mentioned things like the IT, which is going through its second iteration by the sounds of it, and is just causing havoc for everybody. The installation of the tables and the electric vehicles, and sending them out into the gold mines, for example. Is there any lessons that ought to be learned from that? Is there a particular
well, the interesting part being is within WorkSafe, there is actually a massive amount of people who are change management trained. And even I was one of them. I was going through it at the time. And there's a whole group over here that are trained in it. But as they teach you in change management, sometimes you've got to be listening to these guys over here because this over here isn't going to work. But you're in a government department. And government departments don't work that way. They have a target.
Yeah.
They've got to get to that target. And just stupid little things, there's been a lot of money wasted. And
Yes.
quite honestly, for the next 18 months, the cupboard will be bare for WorkSafe. The money's been spent on redundancies. And those who aren't redundant are hiding under their desks just in case there's another little bit of another one.
Yes.
I was quite disappointed to see that there was a cohort listed or advertised. People applied for that cohort, and then they all got a email to say, hey, this cohort is even if you've got no money, beg, borrow, just keep building on your people.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And
the
then,
one thing that you can't be the regulator without.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I wanted to focus in on the support officers and their roles as well, because for a while there, it looked like we were going to lose a proportion of the those support officers. So, what was your experience, engaging with the SOs, and what was the value that they brought to the table?
I've visited all but 2 of the WorkSafe New Zealand offices in New Zealand. Early on in my career, I was involved with the Safer Farms project, about 3 months in before I was even a warranted inspector. And I got to bounce around the country office to office with that. Without an SO, as a visiting person, I would have had no idea what was going on. When you're doing that kind of project, they run it, they glue it, they hold it together. They know where everybody is, because your local manager doesn't want to be dealing with 6 or 8 or 10 foreign inspectors running around the bloody place doing something, and he just needs to know somebody's got them, they're in the right place, and they're doing what they're supposed to. From my own personal experience in our local office at Manukau, and I'll say Manukau, and some ex-inspectors will go, oh, bloody man. We had a bit of a story there, but the 2 that we had there were the most amazing ladies out. One of them is actually retired, so I don't even know whether somebody knows where the keys to the safe are.
Yeah, sure.
But Christine had been there well over 25 years. She knew how everything worked. She could get your computer going. When my last manager started her role, it took her 4 weeks to get her computer going. And the SO was the person dealing with that all the time while she was trying to get into her new job. The SO was dealing with picking up the problems and running and changing IT, and they do an amazing job. They run the cars, they make sure that the servicing is done, they make sure that the inspectors get their allocated PPE, the orders. I don't know how they're doing it now, but yeah, without those amazing, I just, and as I said, if they thought that there wasn't enough work for them, why are senior inspectors doing basically what is a clerical role with their boots under a desk all day, looking at people's files and doing this and running through a spreadsheet to go tick, tick, go across, tick. You haven't managed, when that could have been done by those extra SOs, leaving more time for a senior inspector to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and then reflecting on your time at WorkSafe, Shane, what are some of your key highlights? What are some of the most memorable moments for you?
Most memorable moments, one would be, as I said, my award from the safety charter. That sitting on my desk, I am just so buzzed when they all showed up at my door and going, why are you here? For this. And I went, the introduction of the service and utility strikes project, that started out with 2 ex-inspectors and 2 big industry players coming to me and going, we want underground services in the plant structures. And I went, well, you can't have what you want. It's got a section of positively identifying it. However, it's not what you want. and it's already in there and you've kind of passed your time, but we can do this over here. And me going to Suzanne Watt, who was our construction lead at the time, and this project we got industry on board. That was a really great highlight, and it's a shame that it was kind of run out of steam after Suzanne left the building. The road and roadside worker, as everybody knows, I'm civil works through and through. My hard hat and my boots. That document was bloody fantastic. And I still refer to it whenever I can when people are having questions of go and have a look at that. That is the thing.
Yeah. It is a great document, Shane. Yeah.
The Safer Farms guide that we did. Now, I ran around for years going, why can't we have a same thing, reprint for construction, reprint for manufacturing?
Yeah.
And then my biggest thing with actual WorkSafe guidance is cut the first 20 pages out, glue them in the back, which they actually did for the road and roadside worker after us. Chuck them in the back. We don't need to know about the Health and Safety at Work Act and all this other crap. We've made it to the book, and this is the reason why we've got the book. We either know it, or if we need it, we're going to look elsewhere. We want to know what is a business we need to do. And interestingly, we put the health stuff at the front of that. And two major health and safety organisations, actually, and I won't say who, but most people can guess a few, both said, what'd you put that rubbish at the front for? The main stuff is the stuff at the back about the cones and all. No, the stuff at the front is there because you have to go through it 10 times to then go, shit, now I've found the bit I want about cones or rubbish trucks but I've gone through the health, and it'll annoy you until you just have to look at it at some stage and go, oh, I've got to do this other stuff. And that was one of Rochelle's ideas, putting that at the front instead of and it works brilliantly. Because of course you can't avoid it, you've got to go through it, but it isn't those 20 pages of...
Yeah, brilliant. I love it. Very good. It's kind of very subtle tactics, but very, really powerful. It's good stuff. It's great. And then, so we've kind of covered some of the steps you would recommend or suggest to the regulator to take to try and get it back on track to where it really ought to be. So, in terms of your vision for the future of for WorkSafe, of other regulatory bodies here in New Zealand as well, where do you see things headed? With maybe more of an optimistic lens.
Well, look, if things go right, and I don't know whether, look, as some people have said, the CEO's missing in action. Hopefully he's working his butt off somewhere trying to get things right or figure out where they're missing 18 to 20. But if things go right and those that are left stay, which is another very massive question right now, get the foundations right and then start building on that inspectorate again. Get the right people. Don't employ the hairdressers and for starters, like we were at the end there where we weren't employing people with life skills. And yes, you can train anybody, and I'm not having a go at some of those people because there's a number of them that made fantastic inspectors. But right now you're missing a very big base to your inspectorate, and you just need to get it from industry. Whether that's broken old builders like a couple of my office mates used to be, and dusty old bloody civil works people and people from an engineering background, then get them and train them so that you've got that base to then train future inspectors. Right now, you're so light on experience and training that the guys that are or should or could be like the senior inspectors and that are either doing QA or QC, or they're busy doing their own files, that they're not going to have that time to get on the ground running. And quite honestly, start taking some bloody risks, and you don't take all the easy ones. Don't go, we can't win this. When I did my training as an inspector, we actually had an amazing lawyer who was the head of legal for WorkSafe at the time, and she'd taken so many cases that failed, but they gave us case law. Now, since 2015, what real case law have we ended up with? Because nobody wants to take a case that we're going to lose. But that's the whole reason for case law. Oh, we lost because of this. The inspector didn't do this enough. Well, don't slam the inspector. Let's learn from it. Or we lost because the law says this. And quite honestly, Haslar has more holes in it than a Swiss cheese in certain areas. And trying to use the old regulations with Haslar is an even bigger bloody mess. That you will lose cases, but you'll get case law from it. And people just don't realise you need to lose the cases to... Oh, I've lost you.
There you go. So
that's better.
That's better. No, it's a really critically important point, because from my own perspective, layman terms, but reading through the case law that does come through, it's almost always that the cases have always been directed toward going for the PCBU only, in almost all instances, and it always feels like low-hanging fruit cases as well, where it's almost a guaranteed win. There's a real frustration there that we're missing a lot of opportunities, and it seems like the number of cases that have been brought to court even are in decline as well. So I agree. Like, we've got a really major shortage of case law, despite the legislation being in place now since was it 1st of April 2016. So 8 and a bit years.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just missed
Whereas
opportunity.
you look at the case law with the 1992 Act, well, that's year 2000, you might as well say. By year 2000, there'd been some really interesting cases, and some of them were not exactly won, but stuff came out.
Yep.
So without that challenging stuff, you're not. You might as well have just left it as it was. And quite honestly, I would have liked it left as it was, because I could deal with that old act better than like the new one. But
yeah, it's interesting, that one. It depends on who you talk to. Some people love the current one. Others, like yourself, preferred the previous act. It just feels like we're still really in early days. It's like the act is in its infancy. It hasn't really truly been tested yet. Do you have any?
To me, it was a brand new car in 2015. It was a nice, shiny, hey, we've got a brand new car. Now it's turned out to be an electric car with because it just hasn't been challenged. It hasn't turned out to be the be all and end all. And one, that is that case law, and two, that is it doesn't have the new regulations to back it up, which 8 years should have been.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, if you can comment on this, is there any learnings or takeaways from your perspective in terms of the Fukari White Island trials?
I would prefer not to comment on that.
That's absolutely fine.
Those who did the case, I have a lot of respect for.
Yes.
I also have a lot of respect for that island, growing up looking at it every morning. And I have my personal opinions. So, I'd prefer not to comment on that one.
No, Shane, that's absolutely fine. And you've got every right, of course. No, it just dawned on me as we were talking about case laws, and I just thought, I wonder if there's any insight. But yeah, of course, no problem at all. This has been a really invaluable insight, because for many, unfortunately, the role of the WorkSafe inspector and some of the inner workings of the regulator are still this really mysterious thing. We just don't get the interaction that we really ought to with the regulator and their warranted officers. I think back to the early days here I'm based in Canterbury, so during the earthquake recovery period, where they would frequently attend many of the construction groups and bodies that we had monthly meetings, sometimes even weekly meetings, where we would get updates and share lessons learned, and and where we were headed. It just seems like a different time, and now we just don't see them or hear from them. And it's sad. It's an unfortunate situation we find ourselves in.
And I've even had a certain big construction job in Canterbury, right in the middle of Canterbury, actually, asked for an inspector to go and visit. Please come see.
Yeah.
We have this big thing, and it's very big. It's very, very big.
Yeah.
No, we don't have anybody. And that Australian company was like, yeah, what? They must be bloody busy.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up involved with them. But yeah, it's like Site Safe. Site Safe used to have them there at every meeting. I used to go to the ones in Onehunga in Auckland. I think it was every month we ended up in Onehunga in the evening for a meeting. We were there. And if you're not there, you can't dispel the myths also. But it's also
that's right.
no good sending your construction lead, if they don't know about construction, to something like that, because they're just going to make you look like fools. So you're better off to be sending inspectors. And my old boss was quite good about it. He'd say, come in late because you've got a Site Safe meeting. And so you'd go there as an inspector, and somebody'd say, oh, blah, 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 WorkSafe did, and you go, well, actually, WorkSafe, we didn't. And the fact, so yeah, that face-to-face, that was another one which I found very valuable in my dealings with the construction industry, was actually being at those Site Safe meetings and being, and I'm not a big fan of Site Safe, so I'm not pushing Site Safe in any way, manner or form, but just the value of those meetings, or the Safety Council meetings, or the NZISM meetings. Half the inspectorates are members of the NZISM. And the interesting part being is when I've gone to meetings, so many of them don't actually have a WorkSafe jacket on. I used to go in there loud and proud. WorkSafe's here, guys.
Yeah. It's so interesting.
The health and safety professionals, many of them, there's a few that still look at us as the enemy. Many of them are either ex-inspectors, or they realise the value of knowing an inspector or knowing somebody in the inspectorate to find stuff out. Nobody.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Gosh, this is so good. And then, so what are you up to these days? What's keeping you out of mischief?
My wife's little dairy farm keeps me ticking along. When I'm healthy enough, I go out and bang a few posts. She gives me a pretty good list of jobs to keep. Still working on dying slowly. And I intend on doing that for a few more. And my phone of friends occasionally get me very interested of, some of them come up with some pretty curly questions in the last couple of weeks, which has been very interesting. And then if I get bored, I just go and do a little bit of gold panning in the creek for any luck on that front? Just a little. I haven't won lotto with it yet, but I'm working on it.
That's right. Gotta keep trying, right?
Gotta have some interest in life.
That's right. I dare say you're probably an extremely busy man. Running the farm as well. We caught up just before we went live with the recording, and so how many dairy cows have you got on the go?
So my wife milks 143. Hoping to milk 160 this year. But the dairy farm that we bought was very run down, so it needs a little bit of fencing, a little bit of, there's not much that isn't broken. And Yeah, if anybody in WorkSafe sees this, I don't own a dairy farm and conflict of interest. You know what I think? We do have a health and safety system, though. I don't think we've
Very
put a
good.
farm
Very
name on
good.
it yet, though.
Yep. It's brilliant, Shane. I love it. It sounds like you're having a been fantastic time over there on the coast. So, yeah, good on you. Look, this has been really, really informative. I really enjoyed our catch up today, Shane. So thank you so much for your time.
Anytime, mate. And yeah,
Yeah.
those who are giving my phone number out, please stop.